Welcome to Comic Wars. Think of the show as Fight Night, but without the mess of actual combat. The data will speak for itself before the outcome, but in case it doesn't, we will break all of it down in the outcome at the end of the show. Without further ado, let's get into the overview. So this is where we would start off with guest intros and their guesses. And of course, we don't have any guests tonight, unfortunately. But eventually, hopefully soon, we'll have a couple guests or so. But after that, then we'll get into the background details. This is where some key factors can come from. We know that there have been some battles where background details kind of matter. Things like height and weight can actually play a huge factor. This is exactly why the UFC and other combat sports have different weight classes. You're not going to have the featherweight go up against the super heavyweight. Generally, it's not a good outcome, usually because the super heavyweight is able to essentially just land heavier blows. And likewise, somebody that's extremely short going against somebody that's extremely tall, now you're going to be looking at a potentially possible disadvantages for certain individuals just based on their height, so you can almost have like a disability if you will in combat. But after that, then we get into things like the feats, which is going to be your strengths, your durability, your speed and agility, your combat prowess, your ingenuity in combat, what kind of gadgets you might be bringing, or like a combatant might be bringing to combat, and on top of that, if they have any superpowers, if there's any weaknesses or annoyances, they could play a factor. This is where these things come into play. This is where we're going to announce them. There will usually be some details placed here along the way, just that way we don't have to get into as much during data analysis, which is the next part. And in data analysis is where we actually explore each of these feats as far as we can possibly go with it to see, okay, well, how much damage is this person causing with a punch based on whatever data we have, or how much damage can this person take or this combatant take based on the data we have, provided either be from movies, comics, video games, you name it, whatever media source we're able to pull from. And then of course this is where we break down how fast somebody could be moving, what kind of skills can actually come into play. Now if you're looking at a striker versus a grappler of some sorts, different key advantages they will have against each other. There's things like this that do come in and they play huge factors. This is going to be the meat and potatoes, if you will, of the bulk of your information here. What's going to actually come down to the most data that's actually going to matter in combat. After that, then we get into character pros and cons. This is where we kind of more or less break down, okay, well, what are their strengths and weaknesses in general, but against each other, and kind of weigh it out. This isn't where we get to the outcome quite yet, because after this, then we get into guest analysis and all this data that we've provided so far. This is where the guests. I apologize for that obnoxious car going by. This is where we would get into the guests. They would come up with their own guesses on who would win and why, based on the data provided. And lastly, we come into the outcome, which is where we give out the details as to who wins, why, and what percentage of the time they will win. There have been a few in this season, in this tournament setup. Single elimination, as these always work. But this is, we do see some of these become incredibly one-sided. And there's others that are incredibly close. But of course, there's always a little bit of a preview for the next show at the very end, so make sure to stay tuned until then as well. All right, so let's hop into our first combatant. Our first combatant is Ghost Kiss from the Jake Richmond comic series that also is in the same multiverse or universe as Modest Medusa. Ghost Kiss, Modest Medusa are in the same universe, technically. All right. So, Ghost Kiss, who is she? Well, her real name is Maya Freeman. She's 28 years old. She's roughly about 5'8", give or take an inch or so. And she weighs roughly about 171 pounds. How do we know this? This is because she has the physique of a high-end athlete or a power lifter. So somebody that's going to go and be bulking up for strength. And you can see this through, and we'll go over this. This is where it's going to get into the feats and things like this. But just based on her size and all this and what she does, she works out every single day. There's all sorts of different things she does that she has to maintain for her superhero career. As for her occupation, well, this is the interesting part. She works for a, quote, major paper, end quote, in Portland, Oregon. We don't know which one. I'm assuming it's Willamette Weekly, which I would argue is not really a major paper. It could also be the Oregonian, something along those lines, possibly. But she's also a superheroine. And we know that that's actually an actual gig. It's an actual job somebody can land based on what they can do. And what we've found so far, every superhero or supervillain, they all have powers. So there's no Batman in her universe, per se, as far as we know. As for her area of operation, well, it's in Portland, Oregon. It's the only area we've actually seen her conduct her activity. As for her personality, well, she's very cocky, she's level-headed though, and she's very, very quick thinking. Comes up with some really interesting strategies pretty quickly, just by quickly looking around. So this could play a very, very big key factor for her, as quick thinking and level-headedness is usually a good sign for a good combatant. For some little miscellaneous information, well, her mother has zero recollection of her. Well, of her giving birth and all this, basically even tells Maya's father that no, that's not his daughter, or not her daughter. So, it's a little sad. She has a little tragic backstory there. Alright, so as for her feats, though, things get a little interesting here. So for her strength, she can do planks with roughly about 180 pounds. We know this because she does that with 4 plates. Now, if you look at how big a plate is, that the size she was doing it with, those would be 45-pound weights, or plates, if you will. That's just on her back. She does planks. We don't know how long she does it for. It is for an undisclosed amount of time, but it is something that it's a little interesting, because you don't do planks with weights. Is actually you're putting pressure on your back, so this is going to improve her back strength, but it's also going to improve. It should be improving her posture and a few other things. Next, we also have that she can lift a cement slab weighing roughly about 650 pounds, if you give or take about 150 pounds per cubic foot. And this roughly is about it's about like 5 feet or so ish. So we're saying probably anywhere between 600 pounds and all the way up to about probably 800 pounds, but I think it's more likely it's about 600 pounds. We don't see a whole lot of rebar sticking out, so this is also going to decrease the weight. Because, well, steel rebar, that's pretty heavy. As for some others, well, she lifted a spear made of an unknown material, and she makes that very clear. That's from some mysterious pocket dimension, which is also contains a variety of weapons, which appears to be coming from Modest Medusa's actual home universe. But it appears to be either made of bone and or old battered iron, like an iron-like blade, so we know that it's got either metal or that's a peculiar kind of bone. And if you look at it, if it was just pure bone, then we're looking at about 125 pounds or so, and if you're looking at iron, we're probably looking at about close to about 500 pounds, She was able to go and pull that directly out of a wall that it had rushed or crashed into. But she was able to go and just wield that like it was no problem. Or throw it over her shoulder, rather, and just carry it with one arm. And this is with very, very little hindrance either. So, pretty strong. As for durability, well, she was struck by a car with only a few scratches. And if you were to look at that, that's about 1.8 million newtons. Okay? Million with an M. And this this event is supposed to be similar to what happened in the Charlottesville attack. This is where Ghost Kiss tends to take more of a kind of a political turn. So, not saying much about that, but we know that it's an event comparable or very, very similar, almost to a T, to that of what happened in Charlottesville. If you look at that, that was 1.8 million, a little over that, newtons of force. So it's quite a bit. But she was able to go and just withstand that with only just a few scratches. It's pretty intense. She also had a tiki torch, which was broken in the wrong direction. Just going to mention that now, but it was broken over her head. Took that, little bit of like cringing on the pain, like, that hurts, but continued on. Then she was struck in the back of her neck by a steel pipe and was mostly unfazed. So this is where things become a little inconsistent. Head versus neck. The neck would have been pretty much a crippling blow, but that just tells you, well, she probably has a lot of muscle into her neck, which is going to be softening the blow potentially. So, as for speed and agility, well, she has dodged an electrical beam fired by the eel. It's similar to a taser, but it literally is nothing but an electrical, like a plasma little shot, if you will. A laser beam, a little miniature laser beam. Kind of like a phaser from Star Trek, if you will. But she's been able to dodge that. Looking at that, you're looking at an incredibly high speed. I don't actually have an exact number at this moment, but she was able to dodge it at almost point-blank range, so she is quite agile. She's also capable of constantly dodging, or not constantly, she's able to dodge Flame Blast from Volcana pretty consistently. And then she also dodged a charging Ghost Shark, and if you look at how quick the Ghost Shark was moving, it was fast enough that she had to be, this is where quick thinking comes into play, that she noticed there was a locked door, so she kicked the door open and was able to go and get right out of the way. But it was right on her tail. So it was going pretty quick. I don't have an exact feet per second or miles per hour. I don't have an exact, but he was moving, I would argue, probably faster than 28 miles an hour. It's probably closer to like 35 or 40 miles an hour at least. So, pretty quick. As for her combat capabilities, well, she received her CIA training, she's got that, but mostly fights with boxing and brawling techniques. However, CIA training, what does it typically come with? Modern CIA combat training comes with things like Krav Maga, Jeet Kune Do, and Jiu-Jitsu. From what I've been reading, it could come with things more like, just incapacitate the opponent. Krav Maga, I can totally see this. This is becoming to be one of the biggest martial arts on the face of the planet. Why? Because it offers a little bit of something for every type of scenario. You've got the let's just disable the opponent so you can get out of the scenario, and you've also got the ones where it's let's go and get ahead in the scenario. And there's also going for the kill shots and things like this. But she was trained using the most effective techniques she'd be able to actually use. So, CIA training, but she mostly fights with boxing and brawling techniques. Keep in mind, she does a lot of dodging and weaving, or ducking and weaving. But she also does do things like tackling, getting somebody on the ground, which once again is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu type technique, or tactic, getting somebody on the ground so that way you can ground and pound. Makes it very easy because now they can't dodge, because now they can't use their legs to go and move around. Now it's based on their hips and moving their back and their chest and things like this, and using their mobility that way. It cuts their speed down drastically. As for ingenuity, well, she does focus heavily on using her power to give her a surprise attack advantage to that type of capability. That's her big focus. So. All right. As for her powers, well, this is where things get a little interesting. If you go off of what her powers actually are, now this is where, things become a little, I argue, inconsistent. Because based on what the comic states, it has to be lip contact that actually causes memory wiping, which what it does is the user can erase herself from, or themselves, from a person who comes into contact with their saliva. That includes from lips too. However, it tends to be, if you look at every little instance, it's where her saliva touches. It has to be in direct contact going into the body. So it's got to be, it's almost kind of like saliva to saliva, or saliva going into contact with inside the human body. So it's not necessarily lip on lip contact, because, well, what happens when people kiss? Well, there can be saliva transferred and that type of thing. So this is where that gets into it. It's a little weird. But that's how she works it. So basically when it's happening, they forget who she is, and then she can start all over. Now we know that the difference here is when Maya kisses somebody, Ghost Kiss is still in somebody's memory. Ghost Kiss kisses somebody, Maya kisses somebody in somebody's memory. So that's how that kind of works out. So it's a little interesting. But there hasn't been a whole lot of analysis as to if that's 100% of the time. We don't know. This is something that's just kind of a given based on what we know from the comic. We see little instances where that ends up being a thing. As for weaknesses and annoyances, she just really has an annoyance. She greatly dislikes fighting, quote, freaks and weirdos, end quote. Whatever that means. Alright, next, we have our next combatant, Crow, from Crowworks Comics, one of my own characters. His real name is Danny Parker. He is 21 years old, and that's as of 2010, which is what he appears in the Crowverse. So he is 21 as of where we're at currently. He is roughly about 6'6" tall. He weighs at 250 pounds. That's without his suit. With the suit on, that's an extra 50 pounds, making him a grand total of 300 pounds in the suit, which he will be in combat with. As for his occupation, well, he's a full-time vigilante. Daniel Parker is assumed dead. But he returned to Rain City after he disbanded the Death Gods, which were a group of global vigilantes. They'd been around for centuries. After Daniel found out what happened, had the suspicion of his master being killed, he decided to, after he was given the reins to be a leader, he sent away his deadliest of vigilantes. They were mostly assassins, but sent them off to a scenario where they would surely be killed. And then after that, he disbanded the rest, allowing those that he didn't send a fresh new start, also telling them to no longer just go on with their lives, leave all the Death God stuff behind. And he returned to Rain City to clean up the city that, well, was rotting. You know, the crime and corruption that was going on. I know, pretty cliche. As for his area of operation, well, it's Rain City. It's strictly Rain City. He has gone outside of it, but it's got to be a case pertaining to Rain City. Because that's the city he's cleaning up. As for his personality, well, he's incredibly confident, cocky, highly intelligent, analytical, and incredibly arrogant. You'll get where this goes here pretty soon. His arrogance and his cockiness know no bounds, let me tell you. But there's good reason, because he is incredibly intelligent and he is highly And this, you'll see these do go hand in hand. As for miscellaneous information about him, well, he's the last leader of the Death Gods. He takes criminals' cash after he takes them down. It's how he's able to afford all of his gadgets and how to eat and all this. Even though he's been trained on how to be able to survive in an urban environment and all this, he chooses to be able to fund more gadgets and better equipment and all that. And his headquarters is actually in his deceased father's abandoned scrapyard. And just a little fun fact, his father actually died completely heartbroken that he thought his son had died. His son went missing. He didn't know what happened to him, and he had just recently lost his wife. And he gave up on everything. Well, Daniel didn't really have a good relationship with his father anyways, but that was enough once he found out after he came back that it's actually pretty heartbreaking for him. All right. As for some feats, well, his strength. Now, he's got some limited things because there's things I've shown in the comics and things that they never got released in the following comics, so unfortunately you guys are going to have to just kind of deal with that because these are things that literally were going into issue 5 and issue 6, both of which issue 5 is just about done. I have to redo some things, but that will release at a later date as well. So, alright, for his strength feat, he's capable of knocking out most enemies with one strike, and this is, you have to have a striking force of at least 1,400 pounds of force to be able to do this, and this is also striking places. Not of majority weakness, but you got to be able to strike them hard enough that you can jog their head back with enough G-force that it just knocks them. But he also strikes things like pressure points and things like this in areas which can also cause a lack of oxygen and things like that. But he does strike with a very, very hard strike. But his durability, well, just let's put this in a perspective. He's got a Kevlar and Nomex bodysuit with carbon fiber plates. That should tell you what he can withstand. I'll break that down further in a little bit. But he has tanked a Haymaker from Freak Show, which is over 162,000 psi. Not to be confused with newtons, but this is your pounds per square inch. So imagine about 162,000 pounds for every inch across the size of a fist, which is basically goes the size of your chest. Just throwing it out there. That's getting hit pretty hard. He was able to tank it and then continue fighting and actually defeat Freak Show right after. And he's also tanked hits from Reaper, who is strong enough to rip off car doors off the car with one hand. And, once again, he was able to continue fighting. I'm not going to go and spoil whether he won or lost in this one, but he was able to continue fighting. Keep this in perspective because we've talked about Reaper before and combat situations with other characters from the Crowverse. As for speed and agility, he was capable of catching thrown hatchets in the middle of combat, and this is when there's multiple attackers around him. He's able to go and catch these and also throw them back. He's also evaded and countered 2 attacks at once, and he was able to catch a Smiley around his van brace just to go and get it. Plus, just to break some things down, this is going to get into his combat capabilities as well. He's a very acrobatic and fluid fighter. He uses multiple different fighting styles. This is where things are going to get a little interesting, but he's very, very agile when it comes to speed. He's moving at a much faster pace than your average human being. So his martial prowess, well, he's mastered boxing, Krav Maga, Muay Thai, Taekwondo, kickboxing, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. His fighting style is, once again, very fluid and acrobatic, so he tends to fly all over the place in combat. As for ingenuity, well, he utilizes stealth as a means of quick takedowns, so he prefers just to go and just do one and done, kind of get in there, one strike, call it good, arrest him, and have the police on their way. But he's also been able to sneak up on Wolf before and after he was a member of the Death Gods. Keep in mind, before Wolf was a member of the Death Gods, he was also a member of AIM, which is it's a gang of teenage assassins. They were snipers, and his weapon of choice was more often than not, it was just handguns, typically a 9mm Glock. It's generally it, but he did end up upgrading. But besides the point, he prefers to keep people at a distance, and he plays with the same types of skills as Crow. But Crow is able to actually sneak up on him. And we're talking about a guy who's able to sneak up on almost anybody he comes in contact with. He can sneak up on him very, very easily. And he snuck out, and Crow was able to go and sneak up on him. Says something. But he also keeps the distance between himself and his opponents very close because he's a close quarters combat fighter. He's not somebody that likes to go at range. He can, as he does have some gadgets that allow range. But his gadgetry is primarily used to confuse and intimidate opponents rather than maim and destroy them. However, he does have some that can do just that. And his most annoying trait that him and Wolf both have is he likes to taunt his foes into blind rages, and it makes them easier to read. Now, a typical fighter will tell you, oh, well, that just means you're going to go and get them to go and just waste their energy. They're going to come at you really hard and really fast. They're not going to be as analytical. Yes and no. However, there's also fighters that will tell you in street fights, you do that, you get hit by them, it's going to be getting hit way harder generally, especially if they're a bigger opponent. Crow doesn't care on their size. He will taunt them until they're into a blind rage, so that way he can just essentially just read their moves. He knows they're not going to be able to make a highly analytical, tactic. They're not going to use tactics. They're just going to go and just basically just strike, tire themselves out, and he's going to be able to go in for the easy counter and easy defeat. As for his gadgets, this is where you guys are going to go and like this. So I didn't get a chance to really break down all of his gadgets, but these are the ones all the way up until issue 6. Okay? So these are all the ones you'll be able to see. These have all been used. So his combat suit is Kevlar and Nomex weave suit with carbon fiber plate armor, highly bullet resistant, flame resistant, and slash proof. Okay. Now keep in mind, this does technically, he does have some impact resistant foam all over the place, but it's not as heavy as it is in his helmet. So he does have the same impact absorbing foam, but it's not as thick of a layer. But his combat helmet's set the same way. He's got a carbon fiber inner shell with an impact absorbing foam covering that shell, and a carbon fiber outer shell. So he's going to have he doubles up. So bullet getting through, good luck. It takes a few shots and it's got to be able to hit the same area, or roughly same area, and then it can break through. But even then, it comes into the type of bullets as well. But it comes equipped with a rebreather, which most smokes and gases become filtered into clean air. This includes things like tear gas, any kind of poisonous gas, things like this, they all get filtered out. There, even some liquids also, like he can essentially go underwater and it'll work for a short while before, it can start pushing. So there's all sorts of things that can happen with it. But he doesn't have like a full-on rebreather. It's something that you can just kind of filter things out. So sprays and gases and things don't get through. He's also got a voice modifier, so it changes his voice entirely. He's also got infrared sight, night vision, and has sound dampeners that can be turned on and off. So if there's a sonic attack being conducted, he can sound dampen it so it doesn't affect him. Because it can affect him just like anybody else. He uses these, no more. This comes equipped with some sword breaker gauntlets. You'll notice this is a typical thing with more and more vigilante-like characters now, when they're more quote-unquote ninja-like, if you will. Characters like Batman, Nightwing, Red Hood, Robin, things like this. This is where this initially came from. However, this was something used. This tactic has been used a few different places in the world. Japan is an area where it was actually used. There were some other areas over in Asia. I believe there was at least a country or two, I believe, in Europe that also used this similar type of armory. But they're bladed gauntlets with grapnel launchers on top of the hands, and they also come equipped with some hardened knuckles. So that way when he punches, it hits with that much more punch. but he's also able to grapple away or use his grapple launchers, so he's got limited use of those, but he can swing around kind of like, the best way to describe it, like Venom, off the top of his hands, kind of thing. You can just kind of flick the wrist and it'll shoot out. But he also comes equipped with 5 smoke pellets, which create a large puff of smoke, almost like a cloud, if you will. It's pretty thick, so good luck shining light through. It won't really shine all that far in. As for what else he's got, he comes with 5 flash pellets. Think of little mini flashbangs. And it's just their impact. So the flash comes out right as it impacts. Oops. He's also got some throwing quills. You break this down, what are they? They're in the shape of feathers, but they're just throwing knives. He comes equipped with 8 murder boxes, which are devices that mimic a murder of crows on a loop. This can go on. This is not in the comics, but I'm just going to give a little backstory on these. The little boxes, they've got roughly about an hour-long loop. That's how long these batteries are going to last. They're very short-term because he doesn't necessarily want people coming up to destroy them, but they can last up to about an hour. And they can also be turned on and off through his suit. So, just simply just a button, that's all it is, and turns all of them on. Now, he does not have the option, up until issue 6, he doesn't have the option to be able to turn it on, or turn certain ones on and off. He just turns all of them on. But he's also got a weighted glide cape. The cape can glide instead of, when he's falling, he can use it to glide. But he can also use the cape as a makeshift whip to grab with. I think the best way to describe this, if you guys have seen the show, The Cape, very similar to this. You can use it to actually grab things and yank it away. It's very, very useful. This is actually a fighting style used, I don't know where I saw this, but it's an actual fighting style, cape fighting. It's interesting, to say the least. It also comes with 2 grapnel launcher ammo canisters, so that way, in case he does run out of some on the go, he can just flip open his gauntlet, throw it in there, and slap it back on, and it's good to go. All right. So, most of this has already been broken down because I didn't want to have to go through a whole lot of that. But, if you guys had to guess at this point, you guys got any guesses so far? Who's going to win? I got some guesses. I'm about to break these down though. So we're going to go into getting the pros and cons. First off, we do have to get in the background here. So, like I brought this up earlier and made it pretty apparent, personality is going to play a role here. So is height and weight, but not as much height and weight. Okay? We're going to be looking at her personality. So she's cocky, so is Crow. She's level-headed and and she's a quick thinker. Just because somebody's level-headed doesn't mean they couldn't be angered. Okay? This is where you have to go into the ingenuity of things. Crow is entirely covered, so her ingenuity does 0. So we're just going to have to instantly give this. When it comes to ingenuity, Crow takes that and it's not even a contest. There's 0 ingenuity, she's got it. As for background, if you compare the two, you look at their personalities. Well, Crow is incredibly confident. So, her being cocky, he's also cocky. They're going to have a battle of, like, they're going to be making fun of each other and things like this. They're going to do all sorts of things. Oh, like, yeah, you can't win kind of thing. And it'll get pretty nasty, pretty dirty real quick. But then you've also got Crow. The big thing with him is he's highly intelligent, he's analytical. So he's also the type, as I've shown with his ingenuity, this is where his background, his ingenuity are going to come into play here, why it's an actual force to be reckoned with. So if you guys could tell, Ghost Kiss loses this. She doesn't have enough to be able to combat Crow. Because when it comes down to it, he taunts people into a blind rage. So he's going to find a way to anger her. And we know she is rather quick to anger, and we know this from what happened over in with just a couple things that were like she was called names, and it ticked her off pretty quick because of the context of things. There were certain things that were said. For instance, when her sexuality was mentioned, she was very quick to anger. So she's quick to anger. Now, Crow is by any means, he is not level-headed, per se. He's analytical, he's highly intelligent, but he is also a man on a mission. That's how he works. So he's going to go and just analyze this, and he's like, okay, well, she's going to call names, she's going to do all these other things. She's going to be a nasty person here. I got to be nastier. And I'm going to have to say some things that are going to anger her. Because of what happens when she starts charging him. Well, he's going to quickly start to realize, okay, well, look at her body type and all this, look at her size, all this. Well, he surpasses her both, almost double on weight. Keep that in mind. 300 pounds, he's solid, plus he's got impact resistant stuff, he's able to tank her hits. But his durability is where it's going to come down to a big thing. She's not going to be able to contend with his durability. Her strength could be debatably higher, but at the same time, his striking power is where we see. She may have the physique, but it doesn't necessarily mean just because you have the physique doesn't mean you have the power behind a punch. We don't really get to see. She does planks, so she's good in staying in a position for a long period of time. She's able to hold more than her own weight. However, she can lift up concrete. Okay, that's going to be her lifting power. Okay, that's going to be something that could be some contrast into like an uppercut or something like this. Well, Crow's, he's got her beat on martial arts on martial arts. That's a given. He's a master. She's just got training. He's a master, and she primarily uses boxing, brawling techniques. He uses techniques to go and take her down. He wins that without much of a fight. But strength, this is where strength is going to kind of come into play. They're roughly evenly matched, I would argue. When it comes to strength, he's got enough striking force, but she's going to have enough actual raw strength. She might even surpass him on raw strength. You can see so far. So when it comes down to it, I'd have to say it's kind of a draw. So I'm gonna just gonna go and put pluses on both of them for it. As for durability, well, let's take a look. I think it's pretty safe to say where we've got the durability here. So we'll look at her durability here. Well, she was struck by a car, which is roughly 1.8 million newtons, a little over that. But things like a steel pipe, she was mostly unfazed. She was also dealing with an adrenaline rush at this time too. So things like this, damage like that, can be somewhat suppressed. It'll still hurt, and it can even knock her out of her adrenaline rush to some extent. But she was also struck in the head with a tiki torch, and she cringed at it pretty heavily. So we know that there's certain parts of her body she's more durable in. Her head, however, which is an area Crow would be striking, is not. When it comes to durability, what does Crow come with? Well, he got struck with something that's very comparable to getting hit by a anywhere between 25 and 30 mile an hour car. She got hit with a 27 or 28 mile an hour car. So very comparable. However, she came up with scratches. Crow came up with some broken ribs and he was damaged, but he continued to fight. And he also took somebody down who was far larger and far more powerful than anything that she takes down on a regular basis. You could argue the giant robot she took down, well, she had help, and she was right there at the weak point. And she had no powers that you could really absorb. But he's also, he continually faces off against people that are bigger threats than what she has faced off against. She was taken down by a simple taser. Well, you can't really tase him. You know, he's been hit by gunfire, and he runs right through it. He gets hit with all sorts of things. It doesn't do any damage to him. Plus, on top of that, he's also got a bunch of impact resistance. Pretty obvious where the durability goes. That goes to Crow. As for speed and agility, now this is another one that's going to be a little interesting. If you look at her speed and agility, well, she's dodged an electrical beam, but she's consistently dodging Volcana's flame blast. And she was able to dodge Ghost Shark, which was going somewhere probably close to about 40 miles an hour. So, pretty quick. Her actual overall speed's quick. And her being able to dodge the flame blast, that's actually very, very quick. But what does that really mean for against Crow? Crow is capable of catching thrown hatchets. He's got agility on her. He's got the agility, but speed, no. He's evaded and countered 2 attacks at once, so he's a lot more agile. As for just full-on sprinting, we don't see anything where it's his speed is like phenomenal. No, he's above the average guy. You can see that, but he's not anything like her, where she's actually going to quickly get up to somebody. But her agility and all this, I mean, he's very quick to kind of get into the counter mode. So when it comes down to it, yeah, she's quick to get into the offense. As her counter, he's quick to get right into the point where he can put them into a disadvantage. So this is where they're roughly somewhat evenly matched. So we're going to give that to both of them. They have their areas where they're going to be stronger against the other. You don't see that very often, but this is 2 things we've had that have been able to go in both of their favors. And they're both an advantage and a disadvantage against each other. This is going to be the part where we get a little interesting, because now we're going to be comparing powers versus gadgets. We're going to look at the versatility and the utility of these powers versus gadgets. So, what do we got with Ghost Kiss? She's got memory wiping saliva. Well, we're going to say this isn't going to be effective against Crow at all. So that's instantly, she doesn't have any use against Crow. Because, well, he's covered head to toe. Her saliva does nothing to him. She'd literally have to rip up on his suit just to be able to go get into him, and well, good luck. But then when we get into Crow, are his gadgets going to be effective against her? His combat suit, that's highly effective. It's going to be able to reduce, it goes right into his durability. So he's already got her on that. Swordbreaker gauntlets, those are weapons themselves. He could literally use those to hack away at her if he wanted to. He could use them so she could go and cripple herself and just even blocking. She could be just punching into these blades. Imagine punching into knives. Well, she doesn't have any strength capabilities of breaking through these. And she's not bulletproof. She just got the spandex suit on, maybe with a little bit of padding, but that's about it. As for ingenuity with these things, well, he's going to go right into stealth mode real quick. He's got smoke and flash bullets. And we know she doesn't have any superhuman sensing abilities or any highly enhanced senses, so flash pelts are going to go and totally throw her off. But he's got throwing quills, so at a distance, he could be pegging her with those. What happens with those? Well, he can go for kill shots. Murder boxes, they're going to go and create a lot of confusion for her. Once again, doesn't have any superhuman senses. So he could be going into stealth mode, get these murder boxes going, she'd have no idea where he's coming from, he'd be coming for a one shot. He's got his weighted glide cape, so if she were to throw him off the building, he'd glide right back into the building and come back up after her. Good luck on that. On top of that, he could use his grapple launchers if he wanted to tangle her up. Pull her in. He could use that so she'd pull him in, he can go in for punches. He can use them for all sorts of things. So you can see where this is incredibly one-sided. Dun, 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 dun. That's where it gets into it. The outcome. So, what everybody guess? Anybody voting for Ghost Kiss? Anybody voting for Crow? No? Neither? Both? Who knows? Well, I think it's pretty apparent at this time. Crow completely outclasses her. There's areas where they're kind of like, okay, we're both good in these areas. We both have our strengths. One's got a high striking, really, really high striking force, while the other one has just got overall just brute force. Okay, so you guys match each other, kind of thing. But then durability. And then you've got the ingenuity through Crow's background. He's going to go and trigger her. She's going to get incredibly upset, and she's going to get into blind rage mode, which means level-headedness knocks that out. Plus, on top of that, quick thinking, you're not going to see a whole lot of that, because when she's quickly angered like that, she goes into brute force mode and doesn't think. As I like to call it, caveman, cavewoman type of sensing. Kind of the capabilities of that. They're not going to be something of high intellect. It's going to come from a place of grog must smash. That's basically it. That's what happened with the charging car. That's what happened when somebody questioned or wasn't really sure about her sexuality even. Just a fellow super who completely outclasses her. He's literally a Superman class type of character. And she was about to go and try and knock some sense into him. She would have failed, but she was very, very eager to go and get right in his face about it. So when it comes down to it, yeah, he's got some areas where he's going to be able to completely just get her right into the position he needs her to, and it's going to be like playing not even 4D chess. This is like playing, it's almost like playing tic-tac-toe or Connect 4, luring your opponent in to go and give you the win while you've been able to go and maneuver them into that point where they think, oh, this is the safety point here, I stop them here, but really that gave them the win elsewhere. That's how easily this is going to be able to go in. This battle will be. It wouldn't even be a match. This Comic Wars episode goes to Crow, and he'll move on to the next round. As for the next matchup, it's going to be between Icarus and Alpha Man. Remember, I did say Alucard and Blade would not be participating past round 1 because they would just claim the whole tournament to themselves. They outclass every single person. Well, almost every single person in this, but they would change the outcome too greatly, and it would just be basically coming down to none of these other characters even have a chance. But it'll be Icarus from Mythos Imprint versus Alpha Man from Crowworks Comics. And this week, instead of on Friday, it will be airing on Thursday night instead of Friday. And also expect we will be talking about, on Wednesday, we will be discussing the David Crowley case. Once again, not going into a whole lot. We're just going to go over what we know for a fact. I will have some slides put together, some infographics and all this, but that's what's coming up on Wednesday. So thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you guys on Wednesday or Thursday, typically Friday.